All right, this is the second part of our discussion on plagiarism and references, or on citations and references. Earlier, before spring break, we went through the first half of this PowerPoint, and the slides are posted. I'm not going to go through the entire part that we discussed in class already, but take a look at this to remind yourself of what happens, or like what things constitute cheating or plagiarism, and then the slide here on the consequences for plagiarism. Now we need to get into the referencing part of it, and the number one way to keep things honest and avoid plagiarism is to learn how to reference your sources, especially learning how to reference them correctly. The ACS Style Guide, Chapter 14, which is also posted on the Moodle page, has a much more thorough discussion over referencing than what I'm going to do here, but there are three major ways that the ACS wants references cited in papers. The first one is by superscript, and usually the superscript appears outside of the punctuation and on a sentence that needs to be referenced. So in this example, we have the reference at the end of the sentence outside of the period. This number 3 would go to a reference that you used that would be listed at the end of the paper, and it would be the third reference on your list. In this case, the references are listed in numerical order by how they appear in the paper. The second way is by using italic numbers, and this one goes inside the punctuation. So here it is here for this sentence, and it goes with the sentence then that information comes from another source. Notice I keep saying information. It's not even that you're using words that were already used by somebody else. It's that the idea and that information is not your information, so it's putting in a reference there in that case. So the italics number again goes to a source that would be cited at the end of the paper. In this case, it would be the 6th reference of the paper, and usually again it would be in the order that it appears. So this would be the 6th paper that has been referenced in this paper. And then the third way is known as author-date, and that's because it's going to include in parentheses near the information the author's name and the date. In this case, the references are not going to be in numerical order at the end, but they would be alphabetical order at the end. In all three of these systems, you can cite in the middle of the sentence and include the author's name as part of that citation. And so the first two with the numbers, you can see that we superscript the author's name, or put in parentheses an italics number right after the author's name. In the author date system, the name does not appear in parentheses, but only the year is in parentheses. And so this, you can say, then the specific author and refer to their work that way. Kind of like, if I said, instead of saying something like the student went to the supermarket, you would be able to say which student went to the supermarket. So in the case here, Fraser went to the supermarket, and you have the reference there for it. Obviously that wouldn't need a reference, but you can see what I mean. Is like you use the specific name instead of the researcher or something along those lines. In numbered citations, the first reference used in the paper is given a number 1, and it continues in consecutive order throughout the paper. If this is the style that's requested by the organization, if you're submitted to an ACS journal or some other journal, they'll have similar guidelines for you. Then you may be doing a little bit of shuffling around as you change your paper, you want to keep your references listed with the information. I a lot of times will put a number and then the name just so I can keep track of which names it was that the paper is referencing. But then you start with number 1 at the very first part. So if you had a line of paragraphs, you'd have the first reference would be 1, and somewhere along here you'd have 2 as you continue along in the paper. If you repeat the reference, then you don't give a new number, you might use the same number. So if this figure here had come from reference 1, it would get reference 1. You don't give it a second number. You have to reference anything that comes from another source, including text, tables, figures, or graphs, or anything else that might be there. Sometimes it's websites, it could be sound files, probably not for chemistry, but it could be anything that is not your work. You have to reference it. And then this is the order that they appear later in the text. You would not have appear number 45 or something. If you have to add in a new reference later on, that's what I'm saying. You have to reshuffle everything, and this one would become 2, and this one would become 3, and this one would become 4. So that's why keeping the author's name with it until you're done putting all your references in order is a useful sort of thing. Now, using Mendeley or Zotero, it'll help you with doing that. If you move something, it's going to change your numbers for you. But if you're not using that, which you may not for a shorter paper, then you would have to just shuffle them around yourself. If a reference has 2 authors, you have to give both names, and you can use an and. So, for example, I have made a fictitious reference of myself with Dr. Reagan. It would say Morgenthau and Reagan, and then you would have our superscript here for this. Or it might be like Bond and Ali in the name date system, and then it's a comma after the second name. If there's more than 2 references, or more than 2 authors in the reference, then you have to follow the first name with et al, like here and here. And notice that the et al has a period after all. You don't use a comma before et al, but you may need to use a comma after et al, especially for a date. If you're using the numbering system, depending on the numbering system, actually this one should have been in italics. We'll change that. Then it depends on the numbering system, either superscript or the parentheses with the italics. Sometimes an idea will have more than one reference. If it has more than one reference, then you want to list them in ascending order. So it would be with a dash if it's a series of them. If it's 3 and 5, you would have 3 listed first. If you're using the author date system, as you can see down here, there is a semicolon in between them, and they're in alphabetical order. So in this case, for our chemistry and physics department, Ali is listed first alphabetically, then Crawford, then McGill. It doesn't matter that Crawford's paper came earlier. What matters is that it's in alphabetical order. In the case up here, remember these all are for when the reference appeared in the paper. So they're not alphabetical order. If an author has multiple references, then you may have, this is only for the author date system because otherwise they're all in the order of that they appear in the paper. If the author date system has multiple references, say Dr. Kessler had 2 papers, then you would have to give the two papers with the two different years. If they're in the same year, then you start lettering them. So Stillwell 2015A and 2015B. And then when you write the references up at the end, the A and B has to stay with it when you write it, because these are going to be alphabetical order. So there would be a Stillwell 2015A and a Stillwell 2015B. We should cite the reference in a logical place in the sentence. So it's usually going to be somewhere along the lines like who's reported it, or what the previous results are, then the citation. Or when you talk about their approach, you put that citation closest to what the sort of main subject of that reference is in your sentence. And so there's a number of examples here, and it kind of helps you to come up with your sentence structure when you know that, I'm sorry, my kitties are playing in the other room. I don't know if you can hear them or not. So I just totally lost my train of thought because of the kitties. It helps you with your sentence structure. So you might start off the sentence, recent investigations, and then cite it, show blah, 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 blah. Or you might say it was reported and then cite that, carbon nanotubes can be made, blah, 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 however it is. So that kind of helps you with setting up an appropriate scientific sentence structure by looking at some of these, or gives you an idea of how you might want to set up those sentences. If you have so journals are one type of reference, then there might be other things. And this chapter has a lot more information on those other types of references, but mostly they're going to include the same information. So author names, journal titles, year of the publication, volume numbers, the page of the article. Sometimes it's a complete span. Sometimes if you're only using that one bit of information, it would just be that one page. So for journals, we have a recommended format of author, however many you have, the title of the article, in italics, the journal abbreviation. Rarely do we use the entire journal name, so you may have to look up what the journal abbreviation is for the journal. The year in bold here, in italics we have the volume, and then this is the pages that were included in that reference. Another format is to have the journal abbreviation first, no title of the article, so that's not always a requirement. And then again in bold with the year and the volume number in italics, and then the pages for it. Either of these formats are acceptable for the paper that you're writing for this class. For your publications, you are going to need to check with your journal. For my class, you can also use any of the three types of referencing. So you can use the superscript, you can use the italics number in parentheses, or you can use the author date system. You just need to pick one and stick with it throughout the entire paper, so you can't trade them out. We do put the names in all of the references as the last name of the person first, then a first initial, a middle initial, and any other things that might be there. Occasionally you'll run across a junior or somebody who's the second or the third. For this class, that format is fine. There may be more specific formats that if you're submitting to a different journal, for instance, this is the last name of this author, comma, the first initial, last initial, and a period after each of them. This is the format I would like for you to use. A single name is kind of uncommon, but it does occur. And also in between, in this case, they put a period in it. The exception is for the journal Biochemistry. So if you do run across one that has a single name, put a period after it. And then here's an example of actually for Biochemistry where the first author had a single name. But like I said, for our case, we're going to use the one with the period. So there's more information in chapter 14 of the ACS Style Guide that has been posted to the middle page. You're going to want to open that page or open that style guide up and refer to it as you're writing your references into your paper. And then I want to see your writing plan. We worked on those before break. I had planned to take a look at them. I had big plans for that Friday right before spring break. So what I want you to do is adjust your writing plan for the current situation, considering that we had an extra week off. Hopefully you continue to work on things, but if you didn't, how much time are you going to need to complete this assignment now? We will not have the same presentation format that we previously had. I'm not even sure that you guys will be able to record a presentation. So I'm thinking that we may switch to a poster presentation instead of oral presentations for the end of the class. So you would be taking the paper that you write and turning it into a poster. I did post a link in the announcements to a source for making better posters. That is something you can follow on Twitter, so you want to take a look at that. But this is all kind of up for discussion because it's such unusual circumstances. I really want you to think about how much time you really need for things based off of the discussion we had about planning. And I want you to post a new image of your research plan into the Moodle Dropbox by Thursday night. I'm going to set the deadline for midnight so that I have time to kind of skim through them a little bit and look at them on Friday morning before I have office hours. Office hours are the time when you get to come in and chat with me about things. If office hours are not working for you because you have a conflict with something else, let me know and I will set up a second time to discuss things with you. It is much easier if we can meet and at least have a discussion than for me to answer all of the questions over email. So this is where I'm thinking right now. I do think we probably should move the paper deadline, so be thinking about that. You will still have access to things if you go in through Kent Library, but I know that some of this is going to be much more difficult now, and I really just need to know where everybody is with things. So please take a look at that calendar and really think about it. Don't just like say, well, whatever, because I don't want to make anything difficult on you. And that's all I have for today on this. Let me know, and I hope to get to see some of your faces on Zoom at some point. Bye.